From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. On the cattle markets this week, Tyler Cozzens from the Livestock Marketing Information Center. In addition to the market recap, he'll talk about two factors relating to the prospect of cow herd expansion in the coming months. Then we'll have for you the first in this week's profiles of the 6 Kansas farm couples who were selected to the 2021 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. They'll be so honored in ceremonies later this week. Featured today, David and Sara Combs of Osage County. And K-State's Jenny Ifft continues her series on price risk management for you cow-calf producers. With more today on that Livestock Risk Protection insurance. All that here on this Agriculture Today. Welcome once more. You're listening to Agriculture Today. On our Monday edition, the cattle markets are first up. And for the comments this week, we turn to an agricultural economist with the Livestock Marketing Information Center out in Denver. Tyler Cozzens has joined us, and eventually here we're going to tap him for perspectives on herd expansion and given the factors in play that will be influencing that prospect here as we look forward. More on that in a second, Tyler, but quickly to go back over the market action of this past week. We see something of a mixed bag, but there seemed to be overall a lower intonation to these markets.
Yes, looking at specifically the feeder cattle side of things, the Dodge City, Kansas auction data for this last week, for those 400 to 600 pound steer calves, they sold steady to slightly lower from the prior week, which is about either side of $200 a hundredweight. Those 600 to 700 weights feeder steers sold about $4 higher for the week, just about $177. A little bit heavier feeder steers, the 7 to 1,000 pounds, sold about $4 to $6 lower compared to a week ago, ranging from about $144 to $156 a hundredweight. On the fed cattle side of things, looking at the 5-area average steer price, on a live basis, fed cattle prices split a little bit lower, about $1 to $2 for the week, finishing just above $144 per hundredweight. Now, on a dress basis, the fed prices moved about $2 to $4 lower to about $225 per hundredweight for the week. Interesting thing on the choice box beef side, we saw that move a little bit lower for the week, about $2 to $3, finishing the week about $255 a hundredweight. Kind of big picture things, the geopolitical events that took place over the last week, they've been bearish news for both feeder and fed cattle prices. So this bearish sentiment that we've seen over the last week, it's likely to continue until the market can get a better feel for just the situation and things ultimately start to calm down.
As bullish as the grain markets are, that is weighing on the livestock sector and particularly cattle with the anticipated escalation in feed costs. That's going to be very much in the sights here for a while now. But let's talk about the supply side, if we might. And everybody is keeping an eye locally on this drought, which has gripped more and more parts of the central U.S. for sure. Well, it is a factor to be reckoned with, obviously, as we consider the cow herd size ahead.
It is, and I think a lot more eyes have been drawn to this drought situation. We're starting to enter the third year of this drought, especially in the western portion of the country. The feeder steer prices holding tight is a good sign that, for the producer side of things, but there's a lot of unknowns with this drought. And the most recent drought monitor that was released March 3rd, it's indicating that about 60%, almost 2/3 of the country is experiencing some form of drought. An interesting point of that is about 13% of the country is categorized as extreme or exceptional drought, which would be the D3 and D4 categories. Now, when we compare some of this discussion to last year, about 47% of the country was experiencing drought. So drought was covering less of the country a year ago. But a year ago, nearly 19% of the U.S. was categorized as extreme or exceptional drought. And that extreme and exceptional drought was situated primarily over the southwestern states of the U.S. So in 1 year's time, the drought has expanded to cover more of the U.S., but the severity of the drought has lessened slightly. Mm-hmm. So persistent dryness and drought conditions in the U.S. is concerning, especially when it comes to range and pasture conditions, and particularly hay supplies, production, and prices.
Well, this drought condition is going to be in the limelight for quite a while, of course, and you mentioned hay supplies and prices, and LMIC has just come out recently with some new observations on the hay price forecast, which we want to share here, and that stems from what appear to be still tight stocks of hay coming out of last year, Tyler.
Yes, that is correct. And the most recent data that we have available from USDA is as of December 1st. And those hay stock levels were very low. They're down 6% from the prior year. Current hay stocks are one of the three lowest levels on record. This is due to significant inventory declines that we're seeing in the Northern Plains, specifically the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. All three of those states were down more than 40% from a year ago. Additionally, another 6 states from the western U.S. saw stocks fall 20% or more. So the persistent drought in the western U.S. Has impacted available hay stock significantly. Now, moving some of the discussion over to the production side of things, in 2021, hay acres were down about 6%. Now, other hay acres were down just over 1%. So the decline in the hay acres is likely due to competing crops such as corn and soybeans pressuring hay acres lower. This is especially the case given the recent run-up in both corn and soybean prices that we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months. Now, the higher prices for competing crops has likely led to a 25% decline in new alfalfa seedings, which is the lowest on record. Now, looking on the price side of things, the lower expected hay production this year will likely keep hay prices elevated. LMIC, what we're expecting as far as our forecast for average alfalfa hay prices this year is to be in the mid to low $200 per ton range. On the other hay side of things, other hay prices are expected to be about $150 per ton.
That all brought up here because it resonates when we take up the question of any potential herd expansion and all of these developments. The drought, tightness in hay stocks, high hay prices would seem to suggest somewhat unlikely, anyway, expansion going on. But you at LMIC are measuring this by way of the replacement cow values on the market. You might share that data. Very interesting, Tyler.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and kind of laying the groundwork with that hay and drought discussion, it sort of starts to stem us into just what are some of the underlying factors that kind of go into potential herd rebuildings. And then that third kind of component or factor that we look at are these replacement cow values. And so those are one of the things that we're watching. And we specifically track about 16 areas when it comes to replacement auction data. Replacement price data is showing that any herd rebuilding efforts are starting slowly, especially in the West. From the recent USDA cattle inventory report, there were some indications that pockets of expansion may be starting, specifically in the Pacific Northwest and the upper Midwest for beef cows.
And you've taken a direct look in your analysis at what that might look like, you say.
Yes. So looking specifically at the Pacific Northwest, states we're focusing on there would be California, Washington, and Idaho. All three of those states had higher beef cow inventories. Now, as far as data that LMIC tracks, for the Pacific Northwest, the closest auctions would be Tappenish, Washington, and some of the Montana summary auction data. So looking at both of those data, on the volume side of things, replacement volumes are tracking even to just above last year's level in both markets. But on the price side of things, red heifer prices are about $100 per hundredweight higher than they were this time a year ago. On the bred cow side, prices are mixed, with some cows bringing a slightly higher price than last year. Stock cows, the average prices are about $2 per hundredweight higher than a year ago. Now, switching over to the upper Midwest, Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin all showed increases in beef cow numbers as of January 1. Now, closest auction data that LMIC tracks would be Nebraska or Missouri. And looking at the auction data from those markets, the replacement volumes that have been coming through those auctions are about even with last year. But on the price side of things, generally speaking, bred cows averaged about $50 to $150 per head higher than a year ago. And bred cows were up about $100 across most categories. So kind of wrapping up this discussion on the replacement cow value side of things and just the drought and hay picture, a couple of takeaway points that I want to bring up here. On the drought side of things, depending on how drought conditions change, one scenario could be that when the drought breaks, everyone will add cows, which will lead to a rise in breeding stock prices. If this is the case, then higher replacement values will be an indicator that we'll be watching for, which is why I've discussed some of those key markets there where we've seen some expansion. Mm-hmm. Now, another point would be on the replacement value side of things. Certain markets are seeing stronger prices, but it's not universal at this time. From a regional perspective, replacement prices will likely be a key indicator to help us determine where carrying capacity exists and if we should start to see an expansion in the U.S. beef herd.
Well, it's a variable worth watching here to gauge what may be happening with the U.S. beef herd and whether or not we're seeing additions to the herd, given all these discouraging elements that may keep that at bay for a while. We'll keep up with it through LMIC, of course. And lastly, Tyler, before you go, the market ahead this week, well, anything goes, it seems, because of the volatility. Back to what you hinted at earlier, the geopolitical, the Ukrainian situation. Hard to pin down what might be ahead in the coming trading days, isn't it?
It will be. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. The market is still trying to figure out what exactly is going to go on and what that means for commodity markets moving forward. So I think there's just going to be a lot of volatility, uncertainty in these markets moving forward. So it's a little bit of just kind of a hold your breath and wait and see what happens.
Well put. And we direct folks to the lmic.info website, where Tyler and his colleagues post good information on various aspects of the markets, including what we've discussed today. Have a look at that, lmic.info. Appreciate your time and your input, Tyler. Many thanks to you.
Thank you.
He's an agricultural economist with the Livestock Marketing Information Center. It's based in Denver and is co-sponsored by numerous land-grant universities, including K-State. That's Tyler Cozzens on the cattle markets. And we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and it's our honor and pleasure all this week here on the broadcast to tell you about the 6 Kansas farm couples who were named to the 2021 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. They will be so recognized in ceremonies later on this week here in Manhattan. Now, to refresh your memory, the Kansas Master Farmer Association and Master Farm Homemakers Guild were formed in the late 1920s to publicly recognize excellence in agricultural production, farm living, and community service. And those core criteria continue to this day. In 1953, K-State, through the Cooperative Extension Service, assumed the responsibility for handling the details of selecting the master farm couples. With the 2003 class, Kansas Farmer Magazine became a co-sponsor with K-State Research and Extension. The selection of the Master Farmer and Master Farm Homemaker couples is accomplished through local extension councils and districts submitting nominations, and then a committee selects 6 couples from those. And this week we'll be sharing conversations with the latest honorees. Beginning here today with the story of a couple from East Central Kansas. David and Sara Combs met while in high school in 1971. David from a farm near Waverly in Coffee County, and Sara from a farm near Williamsburg in Anderson County. When they graduated from high school, David attended Pittsburgh State University for a year studying construction science, and Sara was off to business school and then an office job in nearby Parsons. But in 1973, they made the decision to devote their lives to farming. David purchased 80 acres near Olivet, where they still live today, and started out with 240 rented acres, 11 cows, 4 gilts, and a boar. Over the years, more and more opportunities to expand their crop and cattle production turned up. In present day, the Combses operate 3,500 acres, 1,300 acres each of crop ground and pasture, and 480 acres of hay meadow. And they look after 175 spring calving cows. David and Sara have committed the past 47 years to improving the land and the livestock. Locally, they're well known for, and often recruited for, their leadership. David talks about his upbringing on the family farm.
It was just a small farm. I remember shucking corn with the workhorses, and we would milk the cows by hand. it was just a different life than it is today. One that I remember and cherish very much. I mean, you think about the things we did.
Did you get the bug to farm then as a youngster, or did that come later?
It probably come at those times. You know, we started out on the tractor and when I was small and cultivating 2 rows at a time and going in a slow enough gear, you would almost count the spokes going around the tractor tire. And so as I got away from it more, you just went to missing that. When I was a senior in high school, at that time they were putting I-35 in, and the bridge a half a mile north of my house was the bridge going across I-35 on that township road, and my dad had kind of encouraged me to get a job on that bridge construction, and so I did. I worked for them for that summer right out of high school, and from my experiences in high school of making furniture and things at ag classes, I don't know, I thought I wanted to go into shop construction or house construction, furniture construction of some sort, and I started going to school at Pittsburgh. But now you're spending weeks on end away from home, and then them memories of riding the tractors and smelling the earth turnover and the fresh cutting of hay, them things kind of started coming back to me. And
so that started to pull on you back home, which you eventually followed that path.
That's right.
And Sara, just to note, you were a student at business school for a time after high school. Is that right?
That's correct. After I graduated from high school, I went to Clark's Business School on Topeka, and then I took an office job down at Parsons thinking he was going to go 3 more years of school, and, well, that didn't happen.
So talk about how you eventually made your way back here to Osage County for good. You started farming with a brother, is that correct?
Yes. I really didn't know how that was going to work, for sure, only that's what I wanted to do. And
you called it a leap of faith.
And it most certainly was. I mean, I really didn't know how it was going to work. I knew the farm at home wasn't large enough, and my brother had been farming a while, and he had some machinery, and Dad had his machinery, and when I come home, well, we started talking about what we needed to do, and some of the neighbors found out that I'd come home, and Dad had talked about, well, we should have bought this place up north by Olivet, but it had already sold, and it wasn't just a couple weeks later. It come out in the paper again, well, this place was going to come up for auction again. Whatever happened the first time, I don't know, but it come up for auction again, and I met Sara over at the Williamsburg football game. She'd come home from Parsons, and I planned on a date over there, and she had never even looked at this place. And I come over, and I told her, well, I bought us a farm. And she didn't have a choice on the house, because that was the house we bought. And I bought this. My dad bought the quarter, the 280s, and then I bought this 80 in the house from him and started fixing it up.
You really got rolling then, roughly 1975, independently on your own.
That's right.
So you had crops, cattle, you had hogs, and maintained the first 2 of those 3 up to this day. And as you continued to add acreage, continued to build, now you're up to 3,500 acres plus farming, and you have 175 spring-calving cows, and very high grading cattle resulting from that herd. You're quite proud of that.
Yes. It just so happens when the mad cow thing come in 2003, we were already backgrounding calves and getting them calves up to 7 to 8 week. There come an opportunity at that time that if you age sourced them, you had another premium there. The first year I took a few of them to the sale barn, and there was a new thing to everybody, and there really wasn't much of a premium that day on them. I went to feed them out here, and there was a premium there. And at that time, the cattle didn't really grade so well, but that $30 to $40 premium on just to keeping records of the age source give me an opportunity to explore that retaining ownership on out. So through that process, we went to getting better bull selection and retaining heifers back. And what started out, maybe there was only a 15 to 20% choice when we started, and the age source helped us bridge that gap a little, that now that age source went away because of the different export situation, and now those cattle are choicing out 90% or better. So we still continue to do that, not every year, but more often than not, we go ahead and retain ownership and go on with them.
Present day, as far as the cropping side, corn and soybeans are mainstays?
Corn and soybean is mostly it. When the weather's right, we try to double crop at least 100 acres of wheat back, and then actually we come back with double crop beans after them, and that's worked very well. We've went to variable rate fertilizer and grid sampling on all the acres, and we went to doing cover crops, mostly just the ryegrass, and that seems like it helps with the organic material besides the suppression of the weed seeds that we're having trouble with now, and then we graze those acres as much as we can.
Part of this recognition is beyond the farm, and that is in community service, community activities. Sara, you were very instrumental in 4-H activities as an adult volunteer.
Yes, I was a community leader, and I was not in 4-H myself, but I seen the importance of it. And I think it's been important, too, because the girls seen that I took a leadership role, and they've all have followed that in their own careers. It's a good organization.
And as far as serving on boards and committees, David, you've been on school boards, co-op board, conservation district, local committee. The list goes on, actually.
Yes, it does, and I'm still on the Ottawa Co-op board, and I mean it's mostly I didn't seek any of these positions really. They really all come to me and asked me whether I would serve on them, and I've just always felt it was important to do that. You know, God gave me the ability to stay here on the farm and do what I enjoy to do, and when I was asked to serve on those things, that I just always felt like it was a way to give back somehow or the other.
David and Sara Combs of Osage County, among the 6 couples being honored as Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers later on this week. And tomorrow right here we'll tell you about another couple so honored from Northeast Kansas, Wayne and Carrie Grimm. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, our next installment for you cow-calf producers. We've been visiting with our guest about price risk management and steps you can take to engage that risk, if you will. And joining us once more is risk management specialist Jenny Ifft of K-State Research and Extension. Jenny, as we've gone along here, we've listed several options for risk management for the cow-calf operation, price risk, that is. You introduced last week the Livestock Risk Protection Program as an alternative here. And remind us what that is, and then we'll spend some time talking about the revenue guarantee.
Right. So Livestock Risk Protection, it's a part of the broader federal crop insurance program. And it's basically price insurance. It can help a producer achieve a price floor. It works very similar to a put option. It is typically more affordable than a put option. And we've really been focused on, because it's price insurance, we've really been focused on the cost per hundredweight and the prices that you can lock in per hundredweight.
And the element of LRP today that we'll highlight is the aforementioned revenue guarantee. That, in other words, represents calf income, you say.
Right. You think calf income or calf revenue. So first of all, when we talk about the guarantee, how you can think about that is if prices drop, producers could lose a certain amount of revenue. So when LRP pays out, it's designed to provide a payment that brings a producer back up to that guaranteed level of revenue. Now, how you get to the guarantee? Right. It's pretty simple. You pick a coverage price, and then you have a target weight, and it's coverage price times target weight.
It's not all that complicated, it doesn't seem.
Nope, not everything about crop insurance is complicated. So that's the guarantee. And when you have a loss, when prices go down, your indemnity is going to be calculated by that price drop. So what's the difference between your coverage price and your actual price times that target weight? So for target weights, it varies based on what the class of feeders that you're insuring. So if it's lower weight or the unborn steers or heifers, that's going to be up to 600 pounds. So if you think about a 550-pound feeder at today's prices, so let's say you pick a coverage price of $190 per hundredweight for a 550-pound feeder, that's going to give you a guarantee per head of about $1,050. And the cost is $40. For the producer, is $40 per head.
You've put together information on agmanager.info on this, but one of the questions you pose is somewhat generic. Why should a producer pay attention to these guarantees?
Right. So there's a couple different reasons. One is that it can help a producer think through what is and isn't covered by LRP. So you do have that target weight in there that is used to calculate the value of your guarantee and then your indemnities, your payouts. So you're not going to be protected against disease or mortality. You're not going to be protected against changes in your local prices or the prices at your sell barn. LRP is based on national prices, futures markets. So it's useful for understanding that. It can also help a producer understand what's at stake. So not just what's my price per hundredweight, but what's the implications of this for my ranch, for my farm operation. The last part is it can be really an important part of financial planning. So let's say you want to expand your herd, say you want to make an investment. Are you going to have the income there to finance it or to make a loan repayment? Going to be especially useful for working with a lender. This is something you could show your lender, talk to a lender about. It could help you get a loan or maybe get better terms.
Yeah. There are some other aspects which we'll continue to discuss in this series, and one of those we'll pick up on next week is the guarantees at the various levels, the premiums associated with those, and how those might differ to the point that producers need to think a little more about this.
Right. You can't just look at the relative prices. You also need to think about the magnitude of indemnity. So that's what we're going to cover next week.
We'll pick up on that very thing. Right. We'll have you back then. Jenny, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, she's along with us every Monday for the next few weeks, continuing her series on price risk management for the cow-calf producer. Jenny Ifft, risk management specialist with K-State Research and Extension. And with that, our time's away once more. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.